Hey everybody, it's your old pal Wood Doofus here. Not too long ago, I was doing a project at a friend's house where I was making countertops out of this butcher block material that you can buy at the home store. We ended up having some pieces left, so I was able to make a stove cover and a sink cutting board and things like that, and we still have this block left, and so they asked me to cut it up into some cutting boards that they could give as gifts. My first idea was just to cut this thing into 9 equal-sized cutting boards, round the edges, sand it down, put some feet on it, and call it a day. But I got really bored with that idea really fast. So a better idea is to cut this thing into some shapes so that I can actually make some diagonal pattern cutting board. Maybe you don't know what I'm talking about, but you will by the time I'm done. I ended up going to some graph paper and trying to map out a design based on the dimension of this block, so let me show you what I came up with. So here is a scaled down version of my block. Basically the same dimensions, only much smaller. And the first step I've done is quadrisect it by cutting it in half in both directions. And the next step I'm going to do is match up the two middle points and draw some diagonals. Midsection to midsection and connect them. And I'm going to do that on all 4 sides. Now that I got all the corners marked up, I forgot to mention I drew some lines to indicate the direction of the grain in the butcher block. Now I can actually cut these 4 triangles out. I'm going to do that real quick. Alright, now that I got all 4 of the corners cut off, I can redirect this in this fashion. These would basically match up to make the exact same size shape as what I cut it off of. If you don't believe me, that's why I'm doing this. So let's just move this over and pretend like, actually I don't have to pretend. So the idea is that I glue all these together and then glue it to this one, and now I have this huge parallelogram. So in order to change the parallelogram into a rectangle, we just need to cut one edge off of here and then cut that off. Once that's cut off, I can just move it over to the other side, glue it on there, and I have one big rectangle that ends up being about 60 inches by 28 inches. Alright, so I started the glue up process yesterday and it was so annoying I didn't get any footage of it. It's really not that interesting. I was trying to glue all these triangles together, which was a major suckathon. I tried a lot of different things, but I eventually just ended up screwing big holes in certain areas and then putting screws in there to clamp the glue while it dried. And it turned out okay, and most of the holes are on the inside where they're going to be covered up. And of course I took the screws out after the glue dried. That's very important because I need to cut this thing up when I'm done. So I ended up with these 2 major slabs, and now I need to figure out a way to glue these 2 pieces together, which is complicated. So I came up with the really bad idea to use pocket hole screws to clamp these 2 pieces together during the glue up, and hoping for the best. Now if you think that's a terrible idea, make sure you let me know in the comments how stupid you think I am and all that fun stuff. I'd love to hear about it. I will take the pocket hole plugs and put them in there and just call this the bottom of the cutting board. Since I'm going to use feet, there will be a bottom, so we'll just say that's the backside. So you want to know all the stupid things your old pal Wood Doofus just did? First of all, I put the screws in the pocket holes and that seemed to do okay. It wasn't very flush, but it was flush enough. I'm going to send it through a planer later on anyway. Well, I take that back. After I cut it down into board size pieces, I'm going to send it through a planer, and that should take care of any inconsistencies with levelness. The bigger problem was that I thought I was going to save some time by going ahead and plugging up these holes with the pocket hole plugs, and I totally forgot that I left the screws in there, and I can't do that. I was supposed to take the screws out tomorrow and then plug them up and just take the time that it takes, but I didn't. So after I put all the plugs in, I had to frantically take them out before the glue set in, and luckily that was able to happen. Then I decided I'm just going to strap it up and take the screws out with these ratchet straps. I don't have a clamp that's big enough for this 60 inches. The straps worked okay, but once I took the screws out, it started to sag at the point of this piece here, so that's why I have this piece here, and I screw down into it to pull that sag up and keep it flush with the rest of the pieces. And then I went ahead and put more plugs in, and tomorrow we're going to see what this is like. All right, so after I chopped the blocks out of the slab, I was able to take each one of the slabs that wasn't a solid piece and run it through the table saw. I set the fence so that it was the thickness of the butcher block, and then I just pushed it through until I had a bunch of equal strips. After I chopped it up, I did the glue up, and I made sure to reverse every other strip so that I could make this zigzag pattern. The next thing we're going to do is send each one of these glued up pieces through the thickness planer. All right, so I got 5 more here. I still got 2 more glued up. I'm gonna end up with like 9 or 10 of these things, but let's talk about how we got to this point. So here's one of the zigzag patterns, and here's one of the regular old diagonal patterns. So the first thing that I did was to start to fill the voids. I used some black CA glue, and any kind of cracks or seams or voids otherwise that needed to be filled, I used that black CA glue and just filled it in with the idea that I'd sand it down later. The next thing I think I did was to take it to the miter saw and go ahead and chop off both ends and get that squared up nicely. After it was squared up, I actually took an 80 grit sanding disc on the orbital sander and tried to sand down those voids that I had filled with the CA glue. After I sanded those down, I went to the station for my roundovers, and I rounded over all of the corners. I don't even know how many there are. I'd say 8, 10, there's 12 corners. I rounded all 12 corners with my palm sand. No, it's not a palm sander, it's a palm router. And after I did the palm router and got all the roundovers, I took it back to the sanding station and I sanded all the sides and edges with 80 grit sandpaper. And after I did the 80 grit, I went ahead and did a 220 grit to finish the sanding process. And that's how we got to this point right here. The next step is to oil it up and then the feet on there, and we'd basically be done. The next thing I'm gonna do is put on some Doofus Goopus. And I made this stuff myself, and it's just beeswax and mineral oil, and it's gonna seal it real nice. All right, so we're basically all done here. Let me know in the comments section which one of these you like better. I actually like this diagonal one better. This one's a little chaotic, but some people like a little chaos. I'll put a link in the description to the feet that I used and maybe anything else. I can't think of anything that I used. Anyway, yeah, check the links in the description. It helps me out because they're affiliate links, and even if you click them and don't buy anything, you're doing me a real favor. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and as always, don't be afraid to be a doofus.